When I realized my sister had taken everything from me, I didn't even know where to begin picking up the pieces. The words echoed in my head as I sat on the edge of my bedroom floor, the carpet rough beneath my palms, listening to the quiet hum of the ceiling fan above. Outside, the late October wind rattled the window panes, carrying with it the scent of wet leaves and wood smoke. The smell should have been comforting, like home, but home didn't feel like home anymore. Not since everything I thought I could rely on slipped through my fingers like sand. I traced the scuffs on the floorboards, remembering the mornings I had spent here, making breakfast for my kids before school. The smell of burnt toast, the sweet tang of orange juice, and the soft murmur of my husband reading the paper. Those small, ordinary moments that once made life feel steady were gone. My husband was gone. My children were gone, and I couldn't help but feel that my sister, sweet little Maggie with her laugh that used to fill every corner of the house, had taken them from me. We were always close, at least I thought we were. Maggie and I grew up in a small town outside of Boston. I was the older one, the responsible one. She was the wild one, the dreamer. She had a way of slipping through life without ever seeming to touch the ground. But I loved her anyway, fiercely, and I thought she loved me back. Until I found out that love could be an illusion. It started small at first. A borrowed outfit here, a favor there. She would forget to return things or call me in tears needing a ride, only to see her at a party a week later wearing the same shoes she'd said she couldn't afford. I told myself it was harmless. She was family, after all. I was supposed to protect her, not keep a ledger of every little wrong. But the cracks started to widen the day I caught her smiling at my husband in a way that made my chest tighten. It was subtle, just a glance that lingered a second too long, the kind of look you can't quite explain but can feel in your bones. I pushed it aside. I told myself I was imagining things. He loved me, didn't he? And then my job started unraveling too. I was a manager at a small but well-respected accounting firm. I had spent years climbing the ladder, earning the respect of my colleagues. But Maggie's influence crept in there too. She was charming, persuasive, the kind of person everyone likes even when you know they shouldn't. She'd come into the office under the guise of needing help with a friend's taxes or advice for a business idea, and somehow she would end up undermining me in front of clients, planting doubts, making subtle insinuations that my work wasn't thorough enough. At first, my boss shrugged it off. "Just ignore her, she's family," he said. But when the client meetings started going south, when my carefully built reputation began to crumble, I knew it wasn't coincidence. Maggie had a way of turning people against me without ever touching a single word of confrontation. She didn't even have to speak loudly. Her smile did the damage, her laugh, her ability to make everyone feel like I was the unreasonable one. And then came the unthinkable, the kids. I had always prided myself on being a devoted mother. My daughter, Lily, was 7, clever and stubborn in the best ways. My son, Max, was 5, the type of little boy who greets everyone with a grin and a question that could unravel your day in seconds. I never imagined anyone, let alone my sister, could come between me and them. But one evening, I came home to find Maggie playing with Lily, Max laughing as if she had been there all day. My husband was on the couch, not watching them, not scolding them, just smiling. I froze, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Maggie looked up and said, with a casualness that made my stomach twist, "Hey, haven't seen you all day. The kids wanted to hang out." My voice caught. How long have you been here?" "Oh, just a few hours, shh," he said, flipping a lock of hair over her shoulder, as if that explained everything. My husband didn't even meet my eyes, and I knew, in that moment, that I had lost more than just trust. I had lost the people I loved most. I remember sitting at the kitchen table that night, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there, tasting the bitter tang of betrayal and disbelief. It wasn't just the kids, or the husband, or the job. It was the realization that Maggie had systematically taken everything from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Not yet. For weeks, I wandered through my own life like a ghost, watching as Maggie stepped into my shoes with an ease that made my blood run cold. She smiled, laughed, took what was mine, and no one seemed to notice. And in those long nights, lying awake, I replayed every small moment I had ignored, the borrowed items, the late-night calls, the glances too long. I realized I had given her the keys to my life without even knowing it. And then, just when I thought the darkness would swallow me whole, a letter arrived. It was from my Uncle Robert. He had been the one family member who had always treated me like a person, not just a caretaker or a sibling. He was a retired lawyer living in Maine, quiet, thoughtful, and fiercely loyal to anyone he cared for. I had visited him every summer as a child, running through his garden, listening to him talk about life in a way that made sense even when nothing else did. The letter was formal, but something in the tone stopped me cold. Uncle Robert had passed away, and in his will $80,000. $80,000 that, in that moment, felt like a lifeline thrown across the chasm my sister had dug beneath me. It wasn't just the money, it was the recognition. Someone finally acknowledged me, my worth, and the fact that I had survived everything Maggie had done. I didn't know yet what this inheritance would mean in the long run, but for the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me. Hope. Hope, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to take back some of what I had lost. I didn't know how that would happen, not yet. But I knew that the days of hiding and pretending were over. Something had shifted, and this time I wouldn't let it slip through my fingers. Before everything fell apart, my life had a rhythm that felt safe, even if it wasn't perfect. I'd wake around 6:30 a.m., the soft gray light of autumn spilling through our kitchen window, and make coffee that steamed in the chilly air. The smell was a small comfort, grounding me as the house slowly came to life. Max would be the first out of bed, rubbing his eyes, calling for breakfast. Lily would appear seconds later, still clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, whispering a half-formed plan for the day. My husband, David, would shuffle down the stairs in his work shirt, messy hair sticking up in all directions, and hand me a kiss that smelled faintly of aftershave and toast crumbs. We had routine, simple things that made life feel alive. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. Summer evenings on the porch with lemonade, bedtime stories where I'd invent voices for every character. I worked hard, yes, but I also tried to make time for them, even if it meant staying up late grading papers or finalizing spreadsheets. I thought I was doing enough. I thought love was enough. And then there was Maggie. She lived nearby, just a 20-minute drive down the same winding road, and I had always thought of her as part of my support system. We shopped together, shared meals, and occasionally argued over trivial matters like whose turn it was to clean the garage. But deep down, I never suspected she could be a threat to my life as I knew it. She was my sister, my family. She wouldn't hurt me. Would she? I worked as a senior manager at a mid-sized accounting firm called Larkin & Hayes. The office smelled faintly of coffee to and something sharp that came from the old ventilation system. I liked the quiet corners where I could focus, the soft buzz of conversation in the break room, the satisfaction of seeing numbers line up just right. My colleagues trusted me, or at least I believed they did. I prided myself on being meticulous, thorough, and professional. David worked in finance too, but at a larger firm downtown. Our schedules often collided, but we managed it. Weeknights were our sacred time, where we'd sit at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep, nursing mugs of tea and recounting the day's small victories and minor disasters. I loved those evenings. They made me feel seen, valued, like we were a team. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. And I had always believed that family was the anchor. Maggie was part of that anchor. I didn't see the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. Evenings were the hardest when the kids were asleep, and the house was quiet except for the occasional creak in the floorboards. I'd sit at my desk, reviewing accounts, planning meals, or jotting ideas for little family adventures. David would be in the living room, half watching a baseball game, half lost in thought. And sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the phone, wondering if Maggie had called or texted about some insignificant favor. Always insignificant, always harmless, or so I thought. We celebrated birthdays with small, meaningful gatherings. Christmases were crowded with laughter, homemade cookies, and David trying unsuccessfully to light the fireplace without smoke filling the room. My parents lived a few towns over, and we saw them often, enjoying the comfort of familiar voices, the smell of Mom's cooking, and the way Dad's eyes crinkled when he laughed at something David said. Even Maggie had moments that made me proud. She graduated college despite all her distractions, landed a decent job in marketing, and on the surface seemed to be finding her way. I told myself it didn't matter if she borrowed little things from me, if she occasionally used her charm to make friends at my expense. I thought love would balance everything out. I thought I knew her, but there were subtle signs, even then, that I failed to notice. Her calls that came too late at night, the sudden interest in my work projects, her constant presence around David and the kids. I rationalized it. She's family, I said to myself. She's just helpful. And in hindsight, that's exactly how she masked her intentions. One crisp Saturday morning, we had pancakes for breakfast, the sweet smell filling the kitchen, and David flipped Max in the air, laughing as he caught him. Lily smeared syrup on her nose and giggled when I pretended to scold her. Maggie had stopped by to drop off some documents for a friend. She lingered, of course, offering to help wash dishes, talking animatedly to the kids, bending her attention toward David in ways that felt normal at the time. "Mom, look!" Lily shouted, holding up a drawing of our house. "Maggie, do you like it?" Maggie crouched down, eyes wide. "It's perfect, Lily." Ion was like a whisper at first, a sideways glance, a comment made in passing, a client praising Maggie's insights over mine. I dismissed it. I wanted to. But my gut, that quiet, persistent voice I had always trusted, started to scream that something wasn't right. I remember walking into the kitchen one evening and seeing Maggie and David laughing over something on his laptop. The sight should have been normal, they had always shared jokes, but there was a pause, a sudden hush when I cleared my throat. Maggie's smile faltered ever so slightly, replaced by an expression that made my stomach drop. Something had shifted, and I couldn't yet name it. I went to bed that night feeling uneasy, though I didn't admit it even to myself. Life was normal, too normal perhaps, but in the quiet hours before sleep, I felt the first stirrings of fear. Something was coming, and it was coming fast. The first clue arrived almost innocuously, a small incident that I nearly dismissed, if not for the pit in my stomach that refused to go away. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of brisk fall day where the sunlight cuts through the trees at a sharp angle, painting our living room with streaks of gold and shadow. I had just dropped Max off at preschool, Lily was at her friend's house for a playdate, and David was still getting ready for work. Maggie stopped by. She said it was just to return a few books she'd borrowed weeks ago, but something about her tone, too light, too practiced, made me pause. She handed me the stack of books with a smile, then lingered by the counter, idly flipping through a magazine. "Your toast smells amazing," she said casually, leaning against the edge of the counter. Her eyes flicked toward the living room, toward David's briefcase that sat there, unopened, the zipper slightly askew. "He's going to be late, isn't he?" I nodded absently, busy placing the books back on the shelf, but the way she said it, the soft emphasis on he, made me tense. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but my gut tightened. "You look tired," she added. "Everything okay at work?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just the usual." Her lips curved in that way that suggested she knew more than I did. She tilted her head, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and for a split second I felt like I was intruding on a secret I wasn't supposed to see. I shook it off, told myself I was being paranoid. Maggie was my sister. She was always charming. I had nothing to worry about, and yet the feeling lingered. Over the next few weeks, the hints multiplied. Small things at first, David's distracted glances, Maggie happening to be around when I wasn't expecting her, phone calls that ended abruptly whenever I entered the room. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were just friends, I told myself. Maybe I was imagining things. But one evening, the seed of doubt took root in a way I couldn't ignore. I had been home earlier than usual, my workday ending in an unexpected lull. The house was quiet. I noticed the faint smell of coffee, a lingering sweetness of pastries that hadn't been baked by me. Following the scent, I wandered into the kitchen and froze. There was Maggie, standing close to David, laughing softly, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She wasn't just around him, she was with him. The way he looked at her, the ease in his smile, it was intimate, casual, like they shared a world I wasn't part of. I didn't speak. I didn't move. My chest tightened so sharply that I felt like I couldn't breathe. I watched for a few moments, each second stretching into an eternity. Then, as if sensing my presence, Maggie turned slightly and smiled in that way she reserved for people she wanted to disarm. The kind of smile that made it nearly impossible to confront her without looking paranoid. "Hey," she said softly, voice airy, casual. "Didn't mean to startle you." I forced a nod, my lips pressed tight. I just came home early. Oh, that's fine, she said, moving to leave. But Here was a pause, a glance at David that spoke volumes in silence, a brief moment that froze my blood. And then she was gone. I remember standing there long after the door closed, listening to the tick of the wall clock, my mind racing. The warmth of the day outside felt like it belonged to someone else. My heart thudded in a way I hadn't felt in years, and I realized something I had tried so hard to avoid, the possibility that my sister, my own blood, might be undermining the life I had built. The next clue came at work. I had been reviewing quarterly statements when one of my colleagues, Sarah, hesitated before handing me a report. I don't know, she said, glancing at the door nervously. Maggie mentioned a few changes to the client files yesterday. I thought you should know. I felt my stomach drop. Maggie? What do you mean? She suggested a few adjustments, claiming it would help the client. But it seemed off. I didn't know if I should mention it. I nodded, forcing calm into my voice. Thank you, Sarah. I'll take a look. I did, and there it was, subtle discrepancies, enough to cause problems. Nothing blatant, but the intention behind them felt deliberate. Maggie had found her way into my work life, too. I closed the laptop slowly, a chill settling over me. By this point, I could no longer ignore the pattern. It wasn't just one isolated incident. Maggie had been gradually embedding herself into every corner of my life, David, the kids, my career. She had a way of appearing helpful, indispensable, and charming, while quietly destabilizing everything I valued. That night, I confronted David. My voice was steady, though my hands shook as I held the kitchen counter for support. Have you been spending a lot of time with Maggie? Alone? He looked up from the bills he was sorting, confused. What do you mean? I swallowed hard. I saw you two, the other night. And I'm hearing things at work too. She's manipulating situations, David. I trailed off, unable to articulate the depth of my fear and hurt. David ran a hand through his hair, sighing. Ursula, it's not like that. She's just helping. She's my sister-in-law. I trust her. Maybe you're reading too much into it. The words stung not just because of what he said, but because of what he didn't say. Reassurance, commitment, a defense of the life we had built. There was a quiet distance in his tone that I hadn't noticed before, and it gnawed at me. I went to bed that night with a knot in my chest, unable to sleep. Every glance, every smile, every small favor Maggie had done suddenly felt suspect. I began to replay every interaction, every subtle intrusion, every moment of trust I had given freely, and in that silent, restless night I made a promise to myself. I would not let this continue. I would uncover the truth. I didn't know yet how far Maggie's ambition stretched, but I knew one thing: I would protect my children, my marriage, and my life. The first clue had been subtle, the first whisper of betrayal, but it was enough to set me on a path I could not turn back from. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of overcast day where the air feels heavy with unspoken words. I had gone to the grocery store, hoping that a mundane errand would calm my racing thoughts, but when I returned, the house felt off. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice the small details, the angle of the blinds, the smell of someone else's perfume lingering faintly in the air. I stepped inside and froze. Maggie was sitting on the living room couch, legs tucked under her, a glass of wine in her hand. Maggie's hand brushed against his arm in that calculated way she had mastered, the one I had noticed months ago but never fully acknowledged. Ursula, you're home early, Maggie said, her tone too bright, too casual. We were just talking about taxes, work stuff. David looked at me, his smile tight. Yeah, just chatting. Nothing serious. I wanted to scream, to shake them, to demand the truth. But I had learned patience in all these months. I had watched, observed, pieced together the puzzle. And now it was time to confront it, to face what I had feared but never fully admitted. I need to see your phone, I said to David, my voice calm but firm. His brows furrowed. My phone, why? Because I need the truth, I said, moving toward him. I can't keep pretending I don't see what's happening. Maggie's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and I saw at the first crack in her composed mask. Ursula, she started, voice low, almost a whisper, but I didn't let her finish. I grabbed David's phone from the counter where he had set it down. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a sharp, cold clarity. I scrolled through messages, emails, photos. Each one confirmed what I had suspected, each one a hammer blow to the life I had built. There were texts between Maggie and David, flirtatious, secretive, intimate. Plans made for late-night work meetings that didn't exist. Photos of Maggie holding Lily and Max. Captions written in a way that made it clear she was positioning herself as the center of their lives. And worst of all, receipts, expensive dinners, little gifts, outings all paid for by David, given to Maggie, none of it meant for me. I looked up, and both of them were watching me, guilt flashing in their eyes before Maggie's practiced composure returned. "Ursula, this isn't what it looks like," David said, stepping toward me. I held up a hand. "Don't—" Maggie's lips parted, and for the first time I saw her hesitation. "Ursula, Stop," I said, my voice shaking, low and dangerous. "Stop lying. I've seen enough. I don't need explanations. I don't need apologies." The room felt like it had shrunk, the walls pressing in, suffocating me with betrayal. I wanted to grab the kids, to run away, to scream into the night, but I forced myself to breathe. One step at a time, one decision at a time. "David," I said finally, voice steadier now, cold in its clarity, "you have a choice. You can continue this, or you can choose me, your children, the life you promised to protect. Right now." He looked at me, caught between desire, guilt, and fear. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, in the hesitation in his eyes. And Maggie, her usual confidence, was gone, replaced by that barely concealed panic of someone realizing the game had been exposed. "Ursula," he started. "No," I interrupted. "I've heard enough. I need to think, alone." I left the house, the door clicking behind me, and walked to the park nearby. The crisp autumn air filled my lungs, but it didn't ease the ache in my chest. I sat on a bench, watching leaves fall, trying to make sense of how my life had unraveled. Every laugh, every meal, every small moment I had cherished now felt tainted by their deception. And yet, amidst the heartbreak, a spark ignited. This betrayal, as devastating as it was, also revealed something vital, the truth. I could no longer ignore it, no longer pretend. I could act, and I would. Over the next few days, I watched quietly, gathering evidence, documenting everything. Maggie made more mistakes than she realized. Small slips of forgotten text, a comment to a friend, a signature on a receipt. Each one was a thread I could pull. And David, his guilt was palpable. I realized that confrontation alone wouldn't be enough. I needed clarity, proof, leverage. Then came the final piece, a dinner invitation from Uncle Robert's attorney. He had contacted me, asking if I could come in to discuss the will, the $80,000 inheritance. At first I hesitated. I barely knew what to expect. But something about the timing felt almost providential. I arrived at the attorney's office, the scent of polished wood and leather filling the small space. Mr. Klein, Uncle Robert's lawyer, greeted me with a solemn nod. He handed me the documents, carefully explaining the will. My uncle had left the sum specifically to me, citing my years of dedication, my kindness, and my perseverance. He had written a note, "Ursula, you have always been steady, loyal, and true. May this help you find your footing, even when life shakes you." I felt tears prick my eyes. For months I had been stripped of almost everything: my family, my sense of security, my pride. And yet here was a small, solid anchor, a tangible sign that I was not invisible, that I was not powerless. Uncle Robert's recognition felt like a whisper of hope, a reminder that I still had worth, still had strength, and still had a path forward. Leaving the office, I realized the full weight of what I had uncovered. Maggie's betrayal was complete, but so was my opportunity. I had proof, leverage, and a clear sense of purpose. The pieces were falling into place, not for revenge, but for justice for myself, for my children, for the life that had been stolen. That night I sat alone in my apartment, the wind rattling the windows, the smell of brewed coffee lingering in the air. I thought of the coming confrontation, the careful steps I would need to take, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt in control. Betrayal had a way of breaking you or strengthening you. I had chosen strength. The first night after discovering the full extent of Maggie's betrayal, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft ticking of the clock and the occasional rustle of leaves outside my window. The betrayal was like a living thing inside me, twisting and coiling, demanding action. But I knew I had to move carefully. This wasn't about revenge in the dramatic, impulsive sense. It was about reclaiming what was mine, protecting my children, and exposing the truth without losing myself in anger. I started small. The first step was organization. I needed a record, a clear picture of what Maggie had done. I went through emails, receipts, and messages I had secretly saved over the past few months. Every small slip, every inconsistency, every subtle manipulation was documented. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was trying to protect myself and my children from further harm. Next, I carefully monitored my home environment. I installed a few cameras in common areas, not in private spaces, but in places where I couldn't always see the interactions. I wanted to confirm what I already suspected, and I needed undeniable proof if the situation escalated. It was a quiet, almost surgical kind of vigilance. Every day I noted her visits, every unexplained meeting with David, every attempt to interfere with my children. I also began reaching out quietly to people in my professional life. There were colleagues who had noticed anomalies at work but were hesitant to speak up. I connected with them gently, showing concern for the clients, rather than accusing Maggie directly. In doing so, I began building a network of support, people who could corroborate my observations when the time came. Meanwhile, I had to address the elephant in the room, David. I couldn't let him remain passive. He had a choice to make, and I needed to understand whether he would honor the life we had built or continue to allow Maggie's influence to erode it. One evening, I sat him down in the living room, the kids asleep, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows. "David," I said calmly, "we need to talk about Maggie." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Ursula, it's complicated. I don't know how to." "Complicated?" I interrupted. "David, she's manipulating our family, our lives. I have proof. I've watched. I've documented. I know what's happening." He froze, the color draining from his face. You've been watching me?" "I've been protecting my children," I said firmly. "I've been protecting our marriage, and I need to know, are you willing to fight for your family, or are you going to let her take everything?" David looked at me for a long moment, torn between guilt, fear, and the remnants of affection. I didn't need him to answer immediately. I just needed clarity. His hesitation confirmed what I already knew. If I wanted to save what mattered, I would have to act decisively, without relying on him. The next step was strategic confrontation. I arranged a family meeting, involving only the adults who needed to know, me, David, and Maggie. I chose a neutral space, a quiet cafe with private booths, the kind of place where words could be said clearly, without distraction. Maggie arrived, radiant as always, confident, unaware that the tide was turning. I watched her closely, noting every gesture, every practiced smile. This was no longer just about emotion, it was about evidence, timing, and control. "Maggie," I began, voice calm but deliberate, "we need to talk about boundaries, respect, and your influence on my family." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "I don't understand. What do you mean?" I laid the documents on the table, messages, receipts, photos, records of her interference. Her eyes flicked to them, a brief moment of shock before the mask returned. "This is manipulation," I said softly, letting the words hang in the air. "This isn't about being helpful. This is about taking advantage of the people I love. My husband, my children, my career, all of it." I won't let it continue. For the first time, I saw her falter. Her smile wavered, her hands tightening around her coffee cup. "Ursula," she started, voice low, but I cut her off. "No, Maggie, this isn't a discussion. This is a warning. You have two choices. Step back, respect my family, respect our boundaries, or I will escalate this in every way I need to protect what is mine." She opened her mouth, but I held her gaze, unwavering. In that moment, the power shifted. I realized something profound. I had feared her, underestimated her, let her edge her way into my life. But now, with clarity, with proof, and with intention, I held the cards. After the confrontation, I went home and called my uncle's lawyer. The inheritance wasn't just financial, it was a symbol of support, a reminder that someone in my corner believed in me. I began planning carefully how to use it. Part would secure temporary childcare and support while I disentangled Maggie's influence from our children's lives. Part would protect my legal and professional interests. And part, I admitted to myself quietly, would serve as a safeguard against future manipulation. In the following days, I noticed subtle changes. Maggie tried to charm her way back into the house, but I was ready. I politely refused invitations, shifted schedules, and made clear boundaries. I observed, took notes, and stayed calm. No drama, no screaming, just steady, unwavering resolve. And David? He began to respond, slowly. The guilt was visible, but so was the relief. I wasn't attacking him, I was demanding accountability. He realized that to regain trust, he had to act. For the first time in months, I saw him step toward our family instead of away from it. By midweek, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: control. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had discovered the betrayal, gathered proof, confronted the source, and begun to reclaim what was mine. It was methodical, careful, but it was effective. I could feel the balance of power beginning to shift. That night, I sat with a cup of tea, watching the children sleep, listening to the wind rattle the blinds. I reflected on everything: the months of quiet betrayal, the subtle manipulations, the heartbreak. And I realized that sometimes, strength isn't loud. Strength isn't vengeance. Strength is patience, clarity, and decisive action at the right moment. I still had a long road ahead, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. Not the fragile hope of wishful thinking, but the solid, grounding hope of someone who had survived, learned, and was ready to reclaim her life. Betrayal had forced me to awaken, but it would not define me. I had plans, I had proof, I had purpose, and most importantly, I had myself. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly. I didn't announce Maggie's betrayal like a public declaration. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself, and those who had witnessed her manipulations began to notice the pattern. At work, I began scheduling meetings with the clients who had been affected by Maggie's interference. I approached them calmly, professionally, presenting the corrected records and quietly documenting everything. One by one, they expressed relief and gratitude. They hadn't known what had happened, just that certain things seemed off. Now they understood, and my credibility, which I had feared lost forever, began to restore itself. "Thank you for bringing this to light," one client said, shaking my hand firmly. "It's rare to find someone who actually cares about getting it right." I smiled, but inside, I felt the weight of months of betrayal lifting, little by little. At home, I set firm boundaries with Maggie. She tried the usual tactics: smiles, casual remarks, subtle guilt, but I met each one with calm clarity. "Maggie," I said one evening as she lingered near the kitchen doorway, "I will not allow you to manipulate my family. Any attempt to do so will have consequences. I hope you understand." She narrowed her eyes, the first real glimpse of fear I had seen from her in months. "Ursula," she started, voice low. "Not another word," I interrupted. "This ends now." The subtle consequences began to ripple outward. Friends and neighbors who had admired Maggie's charm started noticing her overstepping. Invitations she had counted on were quietly rescinded. People began to question the perfect sister image she had cultivated for years. At family gatherings, the shift was palpable. Cousins who had once shared laughter with Maggie now kept a polite distance. My parents, always perceptive, expressed concern not at me, but at the sudden tension that Maggie could not hide. "Ursula," my mother said gently one Sunday afternoon, "we're proud of you. You've handled this with more grace than anyone could expect." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "It's been difficult," I admitted softly, "but it's necessary." The real turning point came when David finally confronted Maggie directly. After weeks of watching me reclaim control, he realized that any further secrecy would destroy the life we were trying to rebuild. He met her one evening at a local cafe, public enough to prevent outbursts, private enough for honesty. "You've crossed a line," he said firmly. "You've interfered in our marriage, in our children's lives. It ends now. I won't allow it any longer." Maggie's usual poise faltered. For the first time, I saw her panic, her confidence cracking. She tried to argue, to charm, to rationalize, but the reality was undeniable. Her manipulations had been exposed, her influence stripped. She left that evening quiet, subdued, and for the first time humbled. Even her friends began to see the truth. Those who had admired her ambition and charisma started noticing the pattern of deceit. Conversations I had never intended to influence unfolded naturally. People shared observations, incidents, and warnings, confirming what I had already documented. Maggie's reputation, carefully cultivated over decades, began to erode. At school, Lily's teacher discreetly informed me that she had noticed changes in how Maggie interacted with the children. "Your sister has been overly involved," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "I just wanted to make sure you were aware." I thanked her, feeling a bittersweet mix of relief and sorrow. The children had been the most vulnerable in all of this, and now, finally, their safety and emotional stability were being restored. Even David and I began quietly restructuring our routines to safeguard against further intrusion. Locks were changed, schedules adjusted, and routines established that were difficult for Maggie to manipulate. Our children began to feel secure again. Lily smiled more freely at bedtime, Max laughed without hesitation, and the house, finally, felt like home again. In the community, I noticed subtle signs of social accountability. Mutual friends and neighbors started keeping their distance from Maggie. Invitations she might have taken for granted were withdrawn. People began quietly sharing the story in hushed tones, emphasizing the cautionary lesson. Charm and confidence can hide deceit, but the truth eventually emerges. Through all of this, I maintained a calm dignity. I did not seek to humiliate Maggie, to shame her publicly, or to celebrate her downfall. The justice I sought was diligence and focus. Colleagues who had previously been hesitant now came to me for guidance, trust reestablished, not through force or confrontation, but through consistency and integrity. I understood, now more than ever, that professionalism and moral clarity are inseparable. One evening, as autumn deepened and the leaves turned gold and crimson, I sat on the porch with David and the kids. Max held his toy airplane, making it swoop through the air, while Lily recited a poem she had written for school. I watched them and felt a profound sense of gratitude, a feeling that had been foreign for months. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the fear, all of it had tested me, but it had not broken me, it had refined me. David reached for my hand, and I felt the warmth of his presence, the reassurance that we had weathered the storm together. "You've done more than I could have asked for," he said quietly. "Not just with Maggie, but with everything. You kept us safe." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "We kept each other safe," I corrected gently, "and that's what matters." We moved forward together. Therapy, both for myself and for the children, became a cornerstone of our recovery. I wanted Lily and Max to understand that what had happened was not their fault, that boundaries and honesty matter, and that family is built not on perfection but on trust, communication, and care. Maggie, meanwhile, had faded from our daily lives. The social consequences, the exposure of her manipulation, and her inability to reclaim the trust she had broken, left her distant. I did not harbor malice. I wished her reflection and the opportunity to grow from her mistakes. I realized that forgiveness does not mean allowing someone to harm you. It means letting go of anger so you can live fully. I also began to reflect on the inheritance from Uncle Robert. The $80,000 had been more than financial support. It was a symbolic anchor, a reminder that integrity and loyalty are recognized, even when the world seems cruel. I used a portion of it to create a college fund for Lily and Max, ensuring their futures would be secure. Another part went toward counseling and support services for families navigating conflict. The rest, I kept as a safety net, a reminder that sometimes life rewards steadiness and moral courage. Through this process, I discovered a deeper strength within myself. I had survived betrayal, emotional upheaval, and the slow erosion of the life I had built. And in doing so, I had discovered resilience, patience, and clarity. I realized that life's most profound lessons often arrive through pain, and the true measure of strength is not in retaliation, but in rebuilding, in reclaiming one's center with dignity and grace. I began journaling again, a habit I had abandoned during the months of chaos. Writing allowed me to process, to reflect, and to articulate the subtle shifts in emotion that defined our journey. One evening I wrote, The past may shape us, but it does not define us. I am steady, I am capable, and I am not afraid to protect what I love. Community support also played a role. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues who had been quietly observing the tension offered words of encouragement. Some had suspected Maggie's duplicity long before I had. Others had only just understood. Their affirmation reminded me that while betrayal can isolate, truth and integrity ultimately build stronger connections. As the weeks turned to months, the house felt alive again, not with tension, but with laughter, warmth, and the small, enduring moments that define family life. Max's laughter echoed in the hallways, Lily's giggles filled the kitchen, and David's quiet presence brought comfort. Each day was a testament to resilience, to the power of measured action, and to the beauty of reclaiming one's life with intention and dignity. I reflected often on what had happened, the betrayal, the slow erosion of trust, and the eventual revelation. It would be dishonest to say. The scars disappeared completely. They lingered in memories, in lessons learned, in cautious glances when I sensed manipulation or deceit elsewhere. But those scars also reminded me of my strength, of my ability to navigate complexity with clarity, patience, and moral integrity. The healing was not sudden, it was deliberate, slow, and profound. Every restored routine, every shared laugh, every small victory, professional or personal, became a building block of a life reclaimed. And through it all, I understood that strength is not measured by dominance over others, but by one's ability to remain true to oneself while restoring balance, trust, and love. Finally, I began to look forward. Vacations were planned again, small celebrations returned, and family traditions were quietly reinstated. I watched the kids flourish, free from manipulation, safe in the certainty of boundaries, and secure in the knowledge that their mother would always protect them. In this quiet, restored life, I discovered something I had not realized I was missing: peace, not the absence of conflict but the presence of clarity, love, and moral grounding. Life, I understood, is not about the absence of betrayal, it is about navigating it, learning from it, and emerging with integrity intact. And as I held my children close, feeling the steady rhythm of life restored, I finally allowed myself to believe that the worst of the storm had passed and that the days ahead would be shaped not by fear or deceit, but by love, trust, and the quiet power of resilience. Sitting here now, in the quiet of my living room, I can still feel the echoes of those months, the heartbreak, the fear, the slow unraveling of everything I thought was steady. But I also feel the strength that followed, the kind of strength that doesn't roar or demand attention. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that you protected what matters most, that you reclaimed your life with integrity, and that you can look at tomorrow without fear. Life taught me a lesson I won't forget. Betrayal doesn't always arrive in a storm. Sometimes it's a whisper, a sideways glance, a friendly smile hiding intentions you would never suspect. And yet, even in the darkest moments, there is clarity waiting, a path forward, and the chance to rebuild not just what was lost, but something better, steadier, and more resilient. I don't tell this story to shame Maggie or to boast about my own actions. I tell it because it's human. Families are complicated, love is complicated, and sometimes the people we trust most can hurt us in ways we never imagined. But we also have the power to protect ourselves, to set boundaries, and to rise from heartbreak with grace. That's a lesson worth holding close. David and I have begun to rebuild our marriage, slowly but surely. Trust takes time, and I don't expect it to return overnight. But what I do see is honesty, accountability, and a renewed commitment to our family. Max and Lily laugh and play again without worry, and our home, our sanctuary, is quiet, safe, and filled with love. I think about Uncle Robert, too, and the way he recognized my perseverance and integrity with that inheritance. Sometimes validation comes from unexpected places, and sometimes the universe sends small anchors when life feels adrift. That 80,000 wasn't just money, it was hope, a reminder that there are people in the world who see your truth and honor your resilience. And so, I move forward, carefully, thoughtfully, and with a heart that has learned both caution and courage. I forgive where I must, I protect where I must, and I cherish what I cannot replace. Life is precious, And sometimes, the very pain that shakes us becomes the catalyst that strengthens us. If there's one thing I hope you take away from my story, it's this: pay attention to the whispers, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the quiet power of patience, clarity, and moral courage. You can survive betrayal. You can reclaim your and, in time, you can even find peace again. Would you have had the patience and strength to see it through as I did, or would the betrayal have consumed you? Think about that. Reflect on it. And if my story resonates, remember that even when the world seems unfair, dignity, clarity, and love can guide you through the storm. If you've been touched by this story, or if you've faced similar trials, share your thoughts, your struggles, or your victories in the comments below. Sometimes hearing each other's truths is the first step toward healing. And if you want to follow stories like mine, stories of family, resilience, and moral courage, consider subscribing and joining this quiet community where honesty and reflection matter. Life isn't perfect, and it never will be. But we have the power to rise from heartbreak, to rebuild, and to live with intention. That's the story I hope you take with you tonight.